Have you ever heard of a man who cut off his own arm to save his life? Not in a movie, not in a legend, but in the real world, in the silent, endless canyons of Utah. This is the story of Aron Ralston, a climber who walked into the desert alone, chasing adventure, chasing freedom, chasing that feeling only the wild can give. But what he found instead was a nightmare carved in stone. One slip, one falling boulder, one trapped arm. And suddenly the man who felt most alive in the wilderness was fighting for his life inside it. No phone, no water, no one who knew where he was. No hope of rescue, just a canyon older than time, and a boulder that refused to move. For 127 hours, more than 5 days, Aron battled dehydration, starvation, hallucinations, and the crushing silence of being utterly alone. He recorded goodbye messages to his family. He carved his own name into the cliff. He accepted that death was coming until something inside him snapped or ignited. A vision. A choice. A moment of courage most humans will never understand. He realized the only way to live was to do the unthinkable, to break his own bones, to cut through his own flesh, to leave behind a part of himself so he could save the rest. This isn't just a survival story. This is a testament to what the human spirit becomes when death is inches away, and life demands a sacrifice. This is the real story of 127 hours. Before the headlines, before the best-selling book, before Hollywood turned his agony into a blockbuster, Aron Ralston was simply a man who felt most alive where most people feel most afraid, in the wild. Born in 1975 in Ohio and raised in Colorado, Aron didn't just enjoy the outdoors. He belonged to it. The mountains were not hobbies or weekend escapes. They were his church, his therapy, his breath. He climbed. He skied. He mountain biked. He pushed his body into places where others wouldn't even dare to look. His adventures weren't casual. They were compulsive, relentless, almost spiritual. He once said, "If I'm not in the mountains, I feel like I'm not truly living." To most, that sounded reckless. To Aron, it was oxygen. So much so that he walked away from a high-paying engineering job, a career people dream about, to chase an obsession most people feared. His goal, to climb all of Colorado's highest peaks alone. He was searching for purpose, for meaning, for a version of himself the world couldn't give him. And on April 26, 2003, he thought he found it. He packed his gear, grabbed a few snacks, filled his water bottle, and drove into the silent canyons of Utah, completely alone. No note, no phone call, no message left behind, just Aron and the desert waiting for him. Bluejohn Canyon is not the kind of place most people explore alone. It's the kind of place where silence feels heavier than stone, where shadows stretch long and ancient, and where a single mistake can erase a person from the world without leaving a trace. The canyon is narrow, almost claustrophobic, remote, miles from the nearest road, hidden deep within the rugged heart of Canyonlands National Park. It's a labyrinth of sandstone passageways, carved by thousands of years of wind and water. A maze where sunlight doesn't gently fall, it fights its way in, where echoes sound older than time itself. Most people avoid it. Most wouldn't dare to enter alone. But Aron Ralston wasn't like most people. To him, Bluejohn Canyon wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. A challenge whispered by nature. The towering sandstone walls rose above him like silent giants, their orange and red layers glowing softly under the desert sun. The air was cool and still. The quiet felt ancient, almost sacred. Aron moved through the canyon with the steady confidence of a man who knew the land as well as he knew himself. He climbed down ledges that would terrify a beginner. He squeezed through tight slots barely wider than his shoulders. He slid down smooth drops worn by centuries of flash floods. Every jump, every slide, every careful descent felt like part of a rhythm he had danced 1,000 times before. This was where he felt alive, between stone walls, in silence, in solitude. But nature needs only one moment to remind even the strongest human that they are not in control. One slip, one falling rock, one heartbeat of bad luck, and everything changed. T happened in seconds. Aron lowered himself into a narrow drop, his hand bracing against a boulder wedged tightly between the canyon walls. A simple move, a familiar move. One he had done countless times on countless climbs, but this time, the canyon had other plans. First, a subtle vibration. A faint grinding sound. A few grains of sand trickling down like warning whispers. Then, a crack. A shift. A moment of frozen, breathless silence. And suddenly, crash. The massive boulder, nearly 800 pounds of ancient sandstone, broke free and fell with him. In a brutal instant, it smashed into Aron's right arm, crushing it against the canyon wall with a force that felt less like nature and more like fate. The pain was blinding, but adrenaline rushed through him. He didn't scream. He didn't collapse. At first, he fought. He pulled. He twisted. He yanked his body with everything he had. He clawed at the rock until his fingers bled. He kicked the canyon wall so hard his legs shook. He screamed for help, though he knew no one could hear him. But the boulder didn't budge. Not an inch. Not even a tremble. It was as if the canyon itself had closed its jaws around him, holding him there with cold, merciless indifference. Aron Ralston, a man who came to the wilderness seeking freedom, peace, and silence, was now a prisoner of the very place he loved. He looked up at the sliver of sky. He looked up at the sliver of sky far above him. He listened to the canyon settle back into its ancient quiet. No cell signal, no path to climb out, no rope long enough to reach help. No one who even knew he was there. Bluejohn Canyon was silent again, and deep inside, Aron realized something terrifyingly simple. No one was coming. He tried everything. First came the logical attempts, the climber's instinct. Aron pulled out his gear, wedged his chisel against the rock, and hammered with every ounce of strength he had. Clink, 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 clink. Tiny sparks, tiny scratches. But the boulder didn't respond. It didn't crack. It didn't shift. It didn't even acknowledge the effort. It simply sat there, ancient, immovable, indifferent. So Aron changed tactics. He leaned back, hanging his entire body weight against his pinned arm, hoping, praying for even the slightest give. Sweat dripped into the dust, but the rock held him like he was nothing more than an insect beneath its weight. Hours passed. The sun crawled across the sky. Shadows stretched across the canyon, then vanished. The warm daylight slowly faded into a cold, merciless twilight. And with every passing moment, Aron began to understand something terrifying. His arm wasn't just stuck. It was crushed. He looked down and saw his hands swelling, turning pale, then bluish. The tingling sensation faded into numbness. A numbness that felt less like relief and more like a countdown. He checked his supplies. What he thought was enough for a long day's adventure now had to last for survival. Less than 350 milliliters of water, barely a handful of food, not even enough for a single full day. He forced himself to sleep standing up, his body pressed against cold stone, his arm trapped in place like part of the canyon itself. But sleep wasn't real rest. He woke shivering, trembling from the desert cold that seeped into his bones. The canyon, once beautiful and inviting, now felt like a tomb. And the darkness around him was darker than anything he had ever known. By the second day, desperation pushed Aron into problem-solving mode. If brute strength wouldn't free him, maybe physics could. He studied the canyon walls, the angle of the boulder, the tension in his rope. Then he built a makeshift pulley system, a desperate engineer in the middle of a stone coffin. He looped the rope around the rock, anchored it to the wall, wrapped the other end around his body, and he pulled, hard. His muscles strained until they felt like they were tearing. His teeth clenched so tight his jaw trembled. Veins rose in his neck like cables pulling a dying machine. His entire body shook from the effort, but the boulder did not move. Not even a whisper, not even a shiver of hope. It was then Aron felt something new. Not pain, not fear, but the realization of a cruel truth. This wasn't a challenge he could outclimb. Not a problem he could outthink. Not a mountain he could outstubborn. This was something deeper. A test not of strength, but endurance. Not of skill, but spirit. Not of technique, but sheer human will. And the canyon didn't care whether he passed or failed. By midday, the desert heat drained him. His skin dried. His lips cracked. His tiny bottle of water, less than 350 ml when he started, was nearly empty. His arm grew colder, stiffer. The numbness spread like poison. His body felt weaker than the day before. As the sun dipped and shadows swept across Bluejohn Canyon, Aron felt something inside him fracture, not physically, but emotionally, the same way that boulder had cracked before it fell. Aron's hope was beginning to crack too. He stared up at the strip of sky far above, a thin blue scar between the canyon walls. It felt impossibly far, like another world. A world where people moved, talked, lived, a world he was no longer part of. Time stopped making sense. Was it morning? Was it night? The light changed, but nothing else did. The rock beneath him grew colder. His heartbeat grew slower. His hope grew thinner. Sometimes he swore he heard footsteps, voices, a rescue team calling his name. But when he screamed back, only the canyon answered, echoes bouncing off stone, mocking him. He forced himself to keep thinking, keep planning, keep trying, because the moment he stopped, the moment he accepted he was alone, was the moment he'd die. He wasn't just fighting hunger or thirst or the crushing weight of the boulder pinning him. He was fighting the darkness inside his own mind. The darkness inside his own mind. The urge to give up, the whisper that said, let go. It's easier this way, but he wasn't ready to die. Not here, not like this, not without a fight. So he clenched his jaw, drew a trembling breath, and forced himself to survive one more minute. Just one more minute, just one more minute. Because maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to see tomorrow. It hit him like lightning, a surge of defiance that burned hotter than hunger, hotter than thirst, hotter than despair. He wasn't ready to be a memory. He wasn't ready to be a name carved into stone. Not yet. Aron forced himself upright, every movement a scream through his nerves. His arm throbbed. His body shook, but his mind, for the first time in days, was sharp. He replayed the last few hours in his head. The goodbyes, the hopelessness, the quiet acceptance of death. And he felt ashamed of it. Ashamed that he had let the canyon convince him he was already gone. No, he whispered into the cold darkness. His voice was barely a sound, but inside, it was a roar. No, not like this. He wasn't done fighting. He wasn't done trying. He wasn't done living. He looked at his trapped arm swollen and lifeless beneath the boulder. For days, he had treated it like an obstacle, a problem with no solution. Now, he saw it differently. It wasn't his arm that trapped him. It was his fear, and fear was something he could. Aron studied the boulder, the canyon wall, the position of his body. Every angle, every inch of stone he had memorized after days of suffering. There was a way out, a terrible way. A brutal way, a way that no one would ever choose, unless death was the only alternative. But for Aron, that moment had arrived. He hadn't planned to amputate his arm, but now he realized it was his only chance. A final, horrifying, desperate gamble. The kind of decision only a dying man could make, and only a living man could survive. The fire inside him grew, hot, sharp, unstoppable. He steadied his breath. He whispered to himself, "You're not dying here." And as dawn approached on the 5th day, Aron Ralston prepared to do the unthinkable to save his own life. The vision struck him harder than any wave of pain he had felt in the last 5 days. That little boy, laughing, running, arms open wide. It pierced through the darkness around him, cutting clean through the hunger, the thirst, the numbness. Aron blinked, trying to steady himself. Was it real? Was it a dream? Was it his mind slipping into madness? He didn't know, but deep down, in a place untouched by fear or fatigue, he understood one thing. This wasn't a goodbye. It was a reminder of everything he hadn't lived yet, a future he had never imagined, but suddenly desperately wanted. A family, a life beyond the canyon, a chance to hold that child, whoever he was, in his arms. Aron felt something he hadn't felt in days, purpose, not the instinct to survive, not the panic of dying, something far stronger, a reason to live. He stared at the canyon walls surrounding him, the same walls that had felt like a tomb for days. Now they felt different. They weren't closing in, they were daring him, challenging him. Show us what you're made of. Aron's breathing grew sharper. A trembling strength began to rise, pushing through his broken body. He looked down at his trapped arm. The skin was gray. The flesh was dying. The hand was cold. It no longer felt like part of him. It was gone. The rest of him didn't have to be. Aron realized it with terrifying clarity. To reach that future, to meet that child, to step out of this canyon alive, he would have to leave a part of himself behind, not emotionally, not symbolically, but physically. Completely, the decision was monstrous, unthinkable, a nightmare made real. Made real. But for Aron in that moment, it became simple. Life or death. He whispered, voice shaky but certain, "I'm getting out of here." And as the first rays of morning sunlight crept into the canyon, Aron Ralston gathered the last of his strength, the last of his courage, and made the choice that would define the rest of his life. The choice to do the impossible. Aron took a deep breath, slow, shaky, burning like fire in his dry throat. He stared at his trapped arm, an arm that no longer felt like his. The skin was gray and shriveled, the fingers stiff. the flesh numb. It looked more like stone than human. And he realized something brutal. He wasn't cutting off his arm. It was already gone. He was cutting off what was keeping him prisoner. Aron pressed his dull multi-tool blade into his skin. The first cut was a shock, a white-hot flash of pain that shot straight through his body. His scream echoed across the canyon walls, but the canyon didn't care. The world didn't stop, so he didn't stop. He gritted his teeth and continued. The blade was not sharp enough. Not meant for surgery. Not meant for anything like this. It snagged. It tore. It scraped more than it sliced. Every movement sent agony flooding through him, but Aron had passed the point of turning back. Pain wasn't the enemy anymore. Time was. He cut through the skin, through the muscle, through tissue that resisted like wet rope. Then he hit something solid. Bone. His breath shuddered. Bone. His breath shuddered. He knew this was coming. He couldn't cut through it, so he braced himself, gripped the canyon wall, and snapped it. The sound, the feeling was so violent it nearly broke him. But Aron didn't let go. He couldn't, because on the other side of the pain was freedom. He kept working, fighting. He kept working, fighting, cutting, trembling, bleeding. Until finally, after 6 days of being held captive, his arm fell free. And Aron Ralston, half dead, half conscious, covered in blood and dust, stood upright for the first time in nearly a week. He wasn't whole anymore, but he was alive, and he wasn't done fighting. This was not the clean, sterile, choreographed moment Hollywood portrayed. There was no bright light, no calm music, no cinematic hero shot. What Aron Ralston did inside Bluejohn Canyon was raw survival, the kind humanity hasn't witnessed since ancient times. He had nothing but a dull grocery store, multi-tool, a cheap device with a blade barely sharp enough to cut rope, not a surgeon's scalpel, not even a proper pocket knife, just scrap metal versus bone. Aron steadied his trembling hand and began cutting. With every slice, the blade dragged instead of gliding. It tore skin. It chewed through muscle. It scraped past tendons that stretched like guitar strings. The pain was volcanic, surging through his nerves, making his vision blur, his stomach twist, his knees buckle. He screamed, a deep primal scream that ricocheted off the canyon walls as if the earth itself was crying with him. And then came the unthinkable part. The bones. He pressed the blade against them, tried sawing, but the metal barely scratched the surface. There was only one way. Bracing his body against the rock, Aron twisted violently. Once, twice, until the radius shattered with a sickening crack. He nearly passed out. He screamed again as he snapped the ulna, his entire body convulsing from the shock. But he kept going, because stopping meant dying. Piece by piece, tendon by tendon, Aron cut until the final connection tore free. And suddenly, after 5 days, 3 hours, and unimaginable pain, his arm fell away. He didn't collapse. He didn't cry. He didn't scream anymore. He simply stood there drenched in blood, one arm missing, but for the first time in 127 hours, he was free. But the nightmare wasn't over. Freedom came at a price, and Aron had only paid the first half. He was standing, but barely. His right arm was gone. His body was shaking uncontrollably. His blood soaked the canyon floor. His mind drifted in and out like a dying signal. And the world around him did not suddenly become safe. He still had to escape a place designed to trap even the strongest climbers. He tightened the tourniquet, gripping the rope with his remaining hand, and began the impossible task, climbing out of the canyon. Every move was agony. Every pull felt like his last. His vision blurred, his breath rattled, his legs trembled beneath him. But he climbed. When he reached the top, the desert sun blasted him with heat, but it was better than the darkness he left behind. Then came the next challenge, a 65-foot rappel with one arm. One arm. Aron looped the rope through his gear, leaned back and descended slowly, painfully, controlling his entire body with a single trembling hand. He slipped, he gasped, he bled, but he made it down. Then came the final task, hiking miles across the harsh Utah desert, dehydrated, delirious, losing blood, walking on pure instinct. The world swayed around him. His lips cracked. His heart pounded like a drum in a war zone, but he kept going because he wasn't walking toward safety. He was walking toward life. Hours later, sunburned and half-conscious, Aron saw something he thought he'd never see again, people. A family of hikers turned the corner, and everything changed. Their eyes widened in shock. They rushed to him, gave him water, held him steady, sent for help. Minutes later, the distant thump of helicopter blades echoed through the canyon. Rescuers lifted Aron Ralston into the sky. A man torn, broken, bloodied, but breathing. Still alive. Barely, but alive. Aron's survival didn't end when the helicopter blades stopped spinning. His wounds healed, but what he carried inside him was far deeper than any scar. Because Aron's journey wasn't only physical, it was emotional, reshaping how he saw fear, pain, and purpose. It was psychological, forcing him to confront the darkest corners of the human mind, and it was spiritual, revealing a strength that went far beyond muscle or endurance. He learned that survival isn't just about the body, it's about the will, the fire, the refusal to give up, even when the world wants you gone. Aron wrote about his experience in Between a Rock and a Hard Place, a book that inspired millions. He traveled the world, giving speeches, telling people, "You're stronger than you think. You have no idea what you're capable of." He became a symbol, not of a man who lost an arm, but of a man who gained a second life. And then, years later, the vision that kept him alive in that canyon became real. Aron had a son. The same child he saw in that hallucination, the same image that sparked the courage to do the unthinkable, now existed in his arms. A miracle, a promise fulfilled, a destiny completed. Aron Ralston didn't just escape Bluejohn Canyon. He didn't just break a rock. He didn't just amputate an arm. He escaped death itself. And in doing so, he proved something extraordinary. Sometimes life doesn't give you a second chance. Sometimes you have to cut yourself free and take it. Aron Ralston's story is not about pain, it's about power. Not the power of muscle or strength, but the power of the human spirit when it's pushed against the edge of existence. He proved something most people never truly understand. Survival is not luck. Survival is a decision. The decision to keep breathing when your body is screaming to stop. The decision to move forward when every step feels like your last. The decision to believe in life even when death feels like the easier path. Aron's story is the definition of human will. He wasn't a superhero. He wasn't unbreakable. He was a human being, terrified, exhausted, in unimaginable pain. But he refused to quit. He refused to let a canyon become his grave. He refused to let a rock define his fate. He refused to accept that his story had ended. In those 127 hours, Aron discovered a truth that every survivor learns. You don't know how strong you are until strong is the only choice you have. His journey reminds us that life never guarantees safety. It never promises comfort. But it does give us a voice and the power to fight for our own ending. Aron fought for his, and he won. His story is proof that even when the world collapses around you, even when you're trapped, alone, broken, bleeding, even when hope is nothing but a flicker, your spirit, if you choose to ignite it, can become a wildfire. A force that refuses to die, a force that rewrites fate. Aron Ralston didn't just survive. He reclaimed his life. He rewrote his destiny. He proved that the human will is stronger than stone. Aron Ralston walked into Bluejohn Canyon alone, but he walked out reborn, not just as a survivor, but as a man who faced the impossible and refused to surrender. A man who stared death in the face and didn't blink. A man who cut off his own arm, not out of desperation, but out of purpose. But out of purpose. Not to survive a moment, but to survive a future he refused to let go of. A future where he would live, a future where he would love. His story is a reminder to every single one of us, no matter how dark the canyon becomes, no matter how heavy the boulder on your path feels, no matter how hopeless your situation seems, there is always a way forward. Maybe not an easy way. Maybe not an easy way. Maybe not a painless way, but a way. If you're willing to claw, crawl, break, bleed, and fight for the life that still belongs to you. Aron Ralston didn't just survive Bluejohn Canyon. He proved that even in the deepest darkness, even in the loneliest silence, even in the shadow of death itself, the human spirit, your spirit, is stronger than anything that tries to hold you down. All you have to do is refuse to stop fighting.